Because if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm depressed and dealing with all these anxieties and stuff, because I got to be ready to deal with my marriage, I got to be ready to deal with my children, and then getting into business, trying to plan content and all these different dynamics, learning to trust and rest in the process of, okay, if I handle first things first, by the time I get to work on business, all this stuff, it's going to flow better.
Welcome to the Rendered Hope podcast. I am your host, Philip Carroll, and I'm so excited to be with you for another episode. This is episode 19, and I'm so excited for this guest today. Today we have Andrew Bush. He is my pastor. He is my friend. He is a minister, a business owner, a creative entrepreneur, a mentor, and a husband and a father of three. Today, you're going to hear a great conversation that we had just about family, about ministry, about business, about creative expression, how to prioritize, how to put things first, and how to handle life. He has a lot of great advice for those who are in similar situations. And again, just an overall pleasant conversation. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Go ahead and leave a like, whether you're on YouTube or Spotify. Go ahead and leave a comment. Let him know what you think. And you're going to be able to find all of his links and his social media accounts in the description. And with that being said, here is my episode with Andrew Bush. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I'm excited for our conversation and just what you're going to say and for everything that people are going to learn from you and learn about you. But before we get started, could you just tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, my name is Andrew Bush. I'm a pastor. I'm a father. I'm a father of three amazing boys. I'm a husband to my wife, Janelle, and also I'm an entrepreneur. And I love Jesus. So that's it.
Awesome. A part of the reason why I wanted to bring you on is a little bit about what you said and a lot of what you didn't say, just even the nature of your life, being responsible for three children, being a pastor of a church, being a business owner, being a creative, being a husband, being a friend, and all of these things, a mentor to husbands and fathers. And what people don't know is that it's not always as easy as you make it look. I think so often we see people that have a lot going on, that have a lot of gifts, that have a lot of abilities, and we just assume that they have it all figured out, but they don't see the work that goes into it. And part of the reason why I wanted to have you on today is just the theme of this episode being preparation and expression of creativity, expression of just your emotions, not keeping things in, but also learning how to handle those things in a healthy way, whether it's through relationship, whether it's through business, whether it's through ministry. So with that being said, tell us a little bit about your business and a little bit about what you do creatively.
Yeah. So far as creatively, uh, I have a company. It's kind of been on pause for a little while, but I'm planning on jumping back into it. It's called Creators Mandate, and uh, the focus is create with God. It's really to help, like what you were saying, help people that have dynamic gifting, dynamic creativity, narrow that down to the place where, if you had to necessarily pick one place, the one thing that God would call you to do, what would that be? And then really help people build out from there. But then secondly, I have another business. It's called Bush Power Washing. So I power wash houses and concrete, pretty much anything exterior that could be clean, algae, all of that stuff. I do that as well. That's a fairly new side of a business. Been in that about 2 years. Yeah, that's what I do as far as business, and yeah.
It's great and it's a little crazy because I've been able to see some of your work hours and just how much time you have to put into it and how much of yourself you have to put into just the business portion of what you have going on. And that doesn't even include everything else. We talked about the balancing and the preparation that goes into the way you carry your life. When it comes to ministry and dealing with people, I know the last thing we want to do sometimes when we're physically exhausted is deal with people, is to handle what people have going on, and even having the responsibilities of being a shepherd, of being a person who is assigned to tend over the flock, even on top of your responsibilities as a father to three children of different ages, right? We have a newborn, an infant, and a toddler. And it's been so great to see the way you've handled it, because it's not like you had someone telling you what to do every step of the way, but you've really had to lean into God. And for that reason, you've been equipped to mentor and to guide other people that are earlier on in their marriage journeys, and even as young men. So that's been really great to see. One thing I want to talk to you about is just your process when it comes to preparation, when it comes to planning out how you're going to divide your time, and how to split your focus, and even when to let yourself be creatively expressive. Because sometimes it feels like when we open that box, we have to keep that box open. But when you have so much going on and so much taking your attention, it might be difficult to really let ourselves feel that expression. So, what are some things that you've learned along the way? Some things that you've done, or even advice you would have for people that are in a similar situation?
No, that's good. First of all, I appreciate your kind words. But I would say priorities have to be established, because, like on my side, generally, if I don't have my priorities, and really, priorities are what comes first. And I kind of say it like this, right? You have just an example as far as priorities where I walk through is, first, I have my relationship with God, right? Then secondly, my marriage, my wife, and then my children. And then I get into um, my personal vision and the ministry, and all those other things come there. But what I've learned over the years is every time I've tried to skip like the first three, skip, my relationship with God, spending time with Him in His Word, really working on my marriage, keeping our communication lines open, making sure I'm spending time with my children so they don't feel rejected, they don't feel overlooked or underlooked. And if I have overlooked those moments, what happens is if I try to jump straight into entrepreneurship or my business, the even though the business maybe could be bearing fruit or getting results, then now the foundations are now crumbling, So I've learned, and it's been a humbling process to sometimes there's moments when I want to work on business or I want to work on, maybe a hobby or something I want to do, but I have to live by the priority of saying, I got to cover home base first. I got to make sure, first of all, am I in right place with God? Am I spending time with Him? Am I, you know, if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm depressed and dealing with all these anxieties and stuff, because I got to be ready to deal with my marriage. I got to be ready to deal with my children, and then getting into business, creating, and then, nowadays social media, you got trying to plan content and all these different dynamics. I've learned is really learning to trust and rest in the process of, okay, if I handle first things first, by the time I get to work on business, all this stuff, it's going to flow better. My family is not going to uh, hate me for doing what I'm doing, but they're going to enjoy it because they saw me give them the value, give them the time as well. So by the time I do work, they're like, "Oh, Dad's working." There's a respect there, there's an honor there, there's appreciation even for them, and so they get to see the value of also. We do have to work. We do have to put work in on things. We do have to spend time, working and building things, even with other people and counseling people and all that stuff. But I've just learned that priority piece of, man, I got to keep the priorities in order so that by the time I do everything else, it's the other stuff can be effective. And not only that, for my own soul, my own self, I won't be uh, distracted myself, because I know there's times when I've say tried to just skip to working on all this stuff, and then I actually end up not being productive because in my heart it's like, oh man, my kids need me, my family need me. I didn't get in my word enough today, all that stuff. And there's grace for it all. It's not a perfect scenario, but I would say that's one of the things that I've just constantly learned. And then with that, just trusting God, that God, I'm putting you first, all these things first. And by the time you get to creating, because he's the creator of everything. So he's going to give me even more grace to create from a real place.
I think so often we hear stories, whether it's from children or parents, in any form of occupation, whether they're a celebrity or they're just busy, they're a lawyer, a doctor, whatever takes up a lot of time. And you'll hear, even though they found success or even though their parents found success, there's always this story of, okay, but I wish they would have spent more time, or I wish I would have spent more time. And it seems like you have your priorities so that you don't go down that road, even if you have to almost sacrifice a little bit of your busy life as it pertains to business or being creative. And again, what you talked about, the entity of creators mandate, which I do want to get into a little bit, but it feels like when you go from that place, you have that foundation of support, then it's not coming from a place of regret, but from a place of opportunity. Because now you're setting an example of people who will also carry that mindset because they've seen you do that, because they've seen you live that. When it comes to creators mandate, you mentioned that it's something that you have a desire to pick up again soon. um what is the vision of that? Where did that come from? And even the name creators mandate, how did you come up with that, and how have you allowed that idea and that, again, mandate to not necessarily control, but to guide your life?
Yeah, no, that's good. So Creators Mandate came really. So before Creators Mandate, I had a clothing brand called Ford Attire. So I would just make shirts, t-shirts, like just encouraging stuff. My first t-shirt I made was called "Stay Positive," and then from there I just started kind of. I was learning the process of creativity, but also I was learning how to create from a real, authentic place within yourself. And so as I went from that, I transitioned to Creators Mandate. The name came up because one day I was just processing being creative, and this one day me and my wife were talking, and Creators Mandate came up because so mandate means the establishment or assignment or purpose of something really, and the whole creators mandate thing. So creators mandate, it really means obviously create with God. That's the slogan. So the goal is to help people create with God based upon what he has already created you to be and do. So I see it like, um, we all have potential, but potential is untapped ability. So a lot of times we have all this potential in us, we have all these, but we end up having the roadblocks of whether it's low self-esteem, we don't believe in ourselves, whether we don't feel like we have the support, um, whether it's lack of education, whatever the case may be. And so I find that that middle place with, because I know being in the kingdom, there's God has, we all know God has created us for great things, great purpose and all this stuff. But I'm finding a lot of times with being a creative person, if you don't properly have the understanding of the process, you often get overwhelmed and you end up not doing anything sometimes. So the goal is really to help people with it. I kind of see it like this, right? You have identity, you have purpose, and you have growth. Your identity is the foundation rock of your life, right? Your identity is, who am I? I've created an image and likeness of God. That's the original point when God created us to be in his image. In other words, he created us to have relationship with him. Ephesians 2:10 says that we are his workmanship created um, for good works, which he has prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So there's works and things that God has already prepared for us to walk in. And so it's to help people get to that place. And that word workmanship means work of art. That always fascinated me, that God has seen us as a work of art. So in other words, God wants to display a work of art through us, and it's all different. So your expression, my expression is going to be different, but he's wanting to express his nature, his kingdom through us, but in these different creative ways. And so when we establish that identity, then the purpose, in a sense, will naturally come alive. A lot of times we end up trying to be something we're not because we don't know the origin of who we are, who we came out of. And I find once that is taken care of, the purpose of who you are is just going to come out because, like he told
Mhm.
Jeremiah, before you went in your mother womb, I knew who you were supposed to be. I already know you're a prophet. I already knew that. So whether you're a doctor, whether you're supposed to be a counselor, whether you're supposed to be a mom or dad, whether you're supposed to be a missionary somewhere or be an entrepreneur, God has already put that within us. It's just we need the proper environment and even belief system that it will just naturally come alive. And then from there, I say the third pillar, these pillars, is growth, and then now you just continue to grow. You building your skills because you found your lane, and now this is that place of creating with God. And I also say own your difference. You can own the space that God has called you to when you have these pillars put in place in your life. And so yeah, that's really uh, what Creators Mandate is for me, and really the vision that God has showed me about it.
There's such an authenticity that comes when you blend what you're called to do with what you're passionate about. I think it's so easy to see brands that don't have that life in them, that it's clear that they might look nice, but you can tell when something doesn't have passion. And I think for you, even though it's a dream that you have on pause, the fact that you can just so quickly tap into the purpose and the destiny, so to speak, of the vision is why that it's so authentically from you, because it's something that you have and something that you're passionate about. When it comes to blending business and ministry, and even trying to navigate that through the lens of prioritizing your family life, what are some things you've learned about yourself? I think there's such a stretching that occurs when we have to wear so many hats on a daily basis, and have to sometimes do the things that we don't want to do so that we can set ourselves up for the things that we do want to do. So
Mhm.
over the last couple of years, even in the desire that you had to change the name of your business and go into business for yourself from the power washing standpoint, and even through the various times that you've had to pick up your family and move where you live, what are some things you've learned about yourself, and even some things that you wish you could have known a couple years ago, when you were still navigating through the early stages of all of this?
Yeah, no, I think the just kind of going back a little bit what I said about the creators mandate is really like just owning my lane, owning more of who God called me to be. Because I say that is a lot of times when say we get more responsibilities, like becoming a parent, right? Becoming having a family, and then you got business, you got ministry, all these different things. And sometimes what we do, what I was beginning to do was I was trying to create all these new things to sustain the stuff that God is saying to do, right? Instead of just embracing, it's like, okay, God, if you called me to it, if it's in me, then obviously there's grace for it. So learning to really lean more on the grace of God and trusting the process that what is in me needs to come out of me. And so it's going to be a process for it coming out. And there's grace for that process coming out. Also, I think the other thing I've really learned about myself is I'm a very big picture person. Like I am very big detail. I think in big picture. And I've had to learn that about myself, even with dealing with people, being in leadership and different stuff like that, is small details sometimes frustrate me, or I realize sometimes if I'm focused on too many small details, it will throw me off course. And so I've learned even with that is learning what to delegate and what to kind of like the priority thing really, or as values as well, like really learning what I value, because I'm like some things can become uh more priority in your life that really they don't line up with your values. And you start doing things, you try to put it in a priority, but it doesn't really, like you said, passion and purpose and all that stuff, it doesn't really connect with who I am. And so I had to learn to just be honest with myself, honest with God, honest with my family, honest with those around me, and just saying, okay, this is what God is saying. This is what obviously we're graced to do. And when I think about the Bible, when Jonah, he began to run from what God was calling him to do, you know, and the next thing you know, he runs away and causes harm to other people because he was out of alignment. And I find sometimes when we're out of alignment, where God's telling you to start a business, but you want to stay in this corporate job or whatever. And then some people are trying to be in business and God is saying, I need you in the corporate place, right? And so finding that place of where God has called me, trusting the process and sticking out in that process, right? And allowing really the authenticity of who you are to come alive. And from there, everything else is going to be added, right? And so, yeah, that's what I've definitely learned concerning that.
You talked about one of your pillars being this phrase you used, owning your difference. And the way I interpret that, practically in this situation is two ways, just based on what you said. It's not only embracing your uniqueness, but also understanding your strengths and your weaknesses. Would you say that's accurate?
Very
And even the way that you've explained that, in the senses of your own life, is to understand that you're not great or you're not too fond of handling the little details, and for that reason, the need to delegate or seek help, or surrounding yourself not just with anyone but with the right people, right? The people who can cover your weaknesses and also accentuate your strengths, right? We hear about, good leaders are not those who can just deliver on a great product or lead a team, but for those who can hide or cover weaknesses of their team members, and bolster and strengthen the strengths, so that we can see the greatness and also work on the weaknesses. I think, as it pertains to the way you handle that, right? We talked about just handling it one thing at a time, and growing and building from that point of view, whether it's the different avenues of your life or the different jobs in your life, or even the different circumstances, right? Because when you're married with children, you don't always get to dictate the way your day looks, right? Sometimes you have to handle a emergency. Sometimes you have to be there in the school when you don't necessarily feel like you have time to. And tending to those needs is more than just building relationship. Um, what would you say to, and I know you're in the midst of a mentorship for husbands and fathers, so I kind of want to bring that here for just a moment. What would you say to a young father or a young husband who's trying to build a career and balance the relationship they have with their spouse, but also trying to figure themselves out because they're young, because they don't quite know what they're doing? What would be the greatest piece of advice you could give them, um, when it comes to owning their difference?
So yeah, I would say as a father, owning your difference. For one, like you're gonna have to first of all accept some things. And what I mean is sometimes I realize to own your difference, right? To own, okay, if you're married, right? If you have children. So those are two things. Sometimes I'll say this, sometimes we go through the motions and then we're disappointed by the results we're getting, right? So it's like no matter what happens, you're married, right? So at the end of the day, your spouse is still going to be there. Your children, they're not going anywhere. They're not going to, like, you have them until they become adults. So sometimes what we do is we can wrestle back and forth with, oh man, I gotta, I'm married, or I have to do this for my wife, or I got the kids, oh, they're loud, they're getting on my nerves, all that stuff. So it's like either you embrace that, okay, this is the lot that I'm in. So first of all, I'm going to accept this as my responsibility to first of all become the best version of myself, so I can be better for my wife, be better for my children. So that means you need to personally constantly be growing. That means you need accountability. You need somebody to talk to, whether it's finding other men that you look up to and you like, man, you see other say marriages that you may look up to. Man, go connect with them, reach out to them, because there's always things that you can pick up on the way and learn. But I know sometimes we have to own the lot that you're in, and not so that you don't live in dread. And because there's a lot of cliches in culture that people, I'll say this, we're speaking about men. Sometimes men will say certain things like, oh, my wife is the boss, or, you know, I'm just cliche things that really start creating language even for the next generation. But the reality is your wife isn't the boss. Like, you are to lead your family. And I've watched some men shrink back and become like a puppet. You're like, and I'm not saying we submit to our wives as well, right? We submit one to another. We help each other. But I've just watched a lot of men lose the sight of, like, no, God has created you to lead. God put you there to take responsibility for your family, right? And be not just there with your money or work, but emotionally available. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Verbally available. Like, you're needed in those different ways. And I think the more that we accept and start to see that this is a good thing, this is a blessing. We talk about wanting to impact the world. If you have a family, like, you literally have your uh, own sons and daughters to raise up that you can put your handprint on. You can literally love them, raise them up in the ways of God, right? It's a lot harder to go out to somebody else that's been in all the, their own backgrounds or grow up in different family dynamics, and you're trying to help them. It's going to be a lot difficult, right? But you get to shape your children from the ground up, right? And so it's a privilege, it's an honor. And I think the more we own that and accept that, man, this is a blessing, our minds kind of kick in gear, and we start seeing it from a perspective that we want to become better. Like, man, God, I need to be more loving to my children. I need to be more available for my wife, right? I need to help a little more here. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that's my perspective and my advice I would give to someone.
That's so good. I think that's going to help a lot of people in just their ability to step back, right? Sometimes we have to just step back and analyze our situations or think about the things we say before we say them. For us, it might be a joke, it might be something that we grew up hearing, and because of that we normalize it, and we end up doing, as you said, to the next generation what the previous generation accidentally did to us. And it'll keep us in this cycle that every time something goes wrong in the relationship, you just lean back into those thoughts. What was once a joke now becomes a reality
Mhm.
because of your emotions and because of your preconceived notions about how everything is supposed to work, right? So even going off of what you said, right? If we joke around that the wife is the boss, then as soon as she gets a little bossy, we start leaning into that, and then we become bitter and resentful, and we don't love the way we're supposed to.
Right.
And I think that's something that we can apply to a lot of our relationships outside of the marriage. Now, my last question for you on this topic is, again, back to priorities, right? Back to prioritizing God. What does that look like um, for you in this sense of having ministerial responsibilities? Because I think it's different when the priority of our life is devotion unto God, but it can be so different when your ministerial responsibility is unto people. So how have you allowed yourself, and what are some things you've intentionally done to create boundaries in your life to separate those things? Because I know that for you, boundaries is a big thing. The way you allow people to take up your time, or even the parameters you set for those relationships. So what are some things you've done to set yourself up in that way?
Yeah, I think, you know, kind of go even what I just said. I think we have to own, once we own certain things, right? So like you said, spending time with God. So um, for me, I've like built the belief around I need to be with God so I can be effective everywhere else. So it's a conviction in the sense that I don't try to live with an excuse that I can't. So in other words, I may not always have the like perfect morning to spend like 2 hours with God, right? Um, but I've learned to embrace the 30 minutes, and but then also it's a relationship, so it carries out through my day. And I have times with God. I have times, sometimes generally I try to wake up earlier, and I spend time with the Lord. Um, and you know that's ideal. But say if it's a late night, sometimes I may not necessarily get up uh, at the time I wanted to. So I will make sure I still make time for God at some point, whether it's in the middle of the day, whether I'm by myself, whether I go on a walk, whether I'm in the car. I always see it like keeping the fire burning. And I think what happens sometimes is I've learned is sometimes we want the big long times with God, right? But what happens is it's just like they say, how you eat an elephant, you eat it one bite at a time. So if you build upon it, it's like you want to build your altar up. You want to build your prayer life up. Sometimes we want to just dive into deep waters, but we never know how to walk in the shallow. So we end up drowning. And then people end up giving up, quitting. And it's like, yeah, I didn't do it this way. So then you just don't do anything. Right. And so I've learned it's more about consistency than anything. Now I do believe in like longer periods of time with God. Like I think that's important. That's goal to be spent. The more time you can spend with God, the greater it'll be. But I think when it's 3 in the morning, sometimes 3 or 4 in the morning, the kids wake up, somebody's sick, somebody's hurting, somebody's having a dream, a nightmare. Then you got to pray with them, love them, take care of them, and something that may take 2 hours. And so you may not dozing back off, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning. So now you got to get everybody ready, get everybody at the door. You know what I'm saying? So I've just learned it's like relationship. It's relationship with the Lord. Have your, plan, have your structure, have your order. But when it's interrupted, like remember, like you're in a relationship, So that's how I see it.
That's awesome. It's been a pleasure having you today. It's been a great conversation. I'm sure I'll have you again in the near future to talk about some other things. But before we get off of here, could you just let the people know how they can find you, where they can look you up, and what are some of the things that you do outside of ministry, just even on the digital platforms?
Yeah, no, definitely. First of all, I appreciate you having me, Philip. Um, but yeah, so if you want to find me, you can definitely check out my website, prosperwithandrew.com. I have a lot of links in there. But like Philip was saying, I recently did a mentorship for husbands and fathers called Hufe. And I'll do more. I'm going to do more with that. But I also have the replays and all that stuff. It's in my, you'll see it once you go to that website, prosperwithandrew.com. I also have a course called Mind Wars, and it's pretty much learning how to overcome mental battles, dealing with the stress of life and all that stuff, and how to really think with purpose, really have the mind of Christ, and conquer the patterns that the enemy throw at us sometimes to set us back. So really, how to be a mind warrior, so to say, and yeah, so that's the big part. You'll see more of what I got going in there, but definitely right now, that's a lot of what I have going on.
Awesome. Again, so guys, if you want to find those, I'll also include some of his social media links. You can find all of that, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify. Just go ahead and look in the description and go ahead and leave a comment. Let Andrew know how you liked the episode, if you learned anything, and I'm sure he'll come by and check out the comment section and whatever you have to say to encourage him, to thank him for sharing some of this. And with that being said, again, thank you for coming on. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. We're going to have a lot more great content coming up for you soon. I have many more great guests lined up for you. With that being said, again, go ahead and leave a like. Go ahead and leave a comment. Go ahead and follow Andrew. Go ahead and follow me. I'll put my links in the description as well. And with that being said, thank you so much once again for listening, for watching the Rendered Hope podcast. And we'll be with you again very soon. Have a great day.